On May 1, 1962, thousands of shoppers lined up in Roseville, Minnesota, to witness the grand opening of a brand new retail experiment, the very first Target store. This launch ignited a massive wave of mass-market supermarkets, instantly supplying mid-century homes with newly invented convenience ingredients. Housewives immediately went to work, using these items to pioneer a decade of legendary, scratch-made comfort food. Today, we are counting down 25 forgotten homemade snacks from the 1960s that almost nobody makes anymore. 25. Ants on a log. We have to kick off our countdown with the ultimate childhood edible craft project. If you grew up in the 1960s, you knew exactly what this was the second you spotted it waiting for you on the laminate kitchen counter. You started with a crisp green stalk of celery split down the middle to form a perfect little trench. Then came a thick, generous stripe of creamy peanut butter slathered from end to end, topped with a neat, orderly row of raisins marching like little soldiers down the length of it. That was the entire recipe, and no index card was ever required. Moms absolutely loved it because it was incredibly cheap. It snuck something resembling a fresh vegetable into our diets, and it kept high-energy kids quiet and busy at the kitchen table on a long summer afternoon. Kids loved it because helping make it meant you got to lick the peanut butter right off the spoon. A box of Sun-made raisins was only a handful of pennies back then, and a single glass jar of Skippy or Jif stretched for weeks at a time. It was a staple at Cub Scout meetings and elementary school snack tables, but over the decades, it quietly vanished. 24. Pimento cheese celery sticks. Before fancy store-bought hors d'oeuvres and imported cheeses took over the party scene, this humble snack was the star of every single neighborhood gathering. Whenever company was coming over, Mom would pull out the mixing bowl to whip up a fresh batch of homemade pimento cheese. She'd grate a block of sharp cheddar, fold in some real mayonnaise, a dash of onion powder, and those tiny, bright red diced pimentos from a little glass jar. Once the spread was perfectly mixed, she'd carefully spoon or pipe it into the hollow grooves of crisp celery ribs that had been washed and dried. Sometimes she'd cut them into neat, bite-sized 2-inch pieces and arrange them meticulously on a glass relish tray, alongside some radishes and black olives. This tray came out for every holiday dinner, every Friday night poker game, and every afternoon bridge club meeting. It was the perfect combination of crunchy, salty, tangy, and cool all at once. It felt just a little bit elegant without putting a dent in the family food budget. 23. Cinnamon sugar toast. This was the absolute king of quick after-school comfort food. It was so incredibly simple that almost any kid could make it themselves, and most of us did the very second we dropped our heavy book bags on the floor. You started by dropping a slice of standard white bread. Wonder Bread was always the ideal, pillowy canvas into the toaster. The very instant it popped up while it was still scorching hot and steaming, you spread a generous pat of real butter so it soaked completely into the bread. Then came the magic step. You took a shaker and blanketed the bread with a heavy layer of mixed cinnamon and sugar. Dedicated moms would take it one step further and pop the whole slice under the oven broiler for just a few seconds. Watch it closely because the sugar would suddenly bubble up and melt into a sweet, crackly, caramelized crust. A lot of households kept a recycled spice jar filled with a pre-mixed blend of cinnamon sugar sitting right in the cupboard just for this daily ritual. It was warm and comforting, costing next to nothing to make but tasting like $1,000,000. 22. Classic deviled eggs. No 1960s church picnic, neighborhood funeral, or backyard 4th of July barbecue could ever be considered complete without a plate of these sitting on the table. You started by hard-boiling a dozen eggs, carefully peeling them and slicing them perfectly in half lengthwise. The real work was popping out the firm yellow yolks and mashing them up with a fork, combining them with mayonnaise, a squirt of yellow mustard, and a splash of sweet pickle juice or vinegar to give it some kick. Once it was smooth, you spooned or piped the yellow filling right back into the egg white cups. And remember, Dusting the top with a shake of paprika was practically a federal law back then. The true status symbol of a 1960s housewife was owning a dedicated, scalloped glass deviled egg plate, a special dish with little egg-shaped indentations designed solely to keep them from sliding around in transit. Making them was always a bit of a test because a few eggs would always crack or refuse to peel cleanly, which was secretly great news because the cook got to eat all the ugly rejects right there at the sink. 21. Pigs in a blanket. This snack pulled double duty as both a late-night cocktail party appetizer for the adults and a legendary weekend lunch treat for the kids. The absolute magic of this recipe relied on that iconic blue tube of Pillsbury crescent roll dough. Kids would line up in the kitchen just to hear that loud, satisfying pop when you pressed a spoon against the cardboard seam to open the can. You'd unroll the triangles of dough, cut them into smaller pieces, and tightly wrap them around individual cocktail wieners or small chunks of standard hot dogs. Once they were laid out on a baking sheet, they went into the oven until the dough puffed up into a golden, flaky, buttery crust. They were served piping hot, usually surrounding a little bowl of yellow mustard or ketchup for dipping. There was something deeply satisfying about biting through that soft, warm breading into a savory little sausage, and a whole tray of them would vanish in a matter of minutes. Some families would slide a sliver of American cheese inside the blanket before baking for an extra gooey surprise. It was simple, hands-on, and pure fun. Before we move on to number 20 on our countdown, we need to settle a massive, decades-old kitchen debate. When your mom brought out a hot tray of fresh pigs in a blanket, what was your absolute go-to dipping sauce? Were you a purist who strictly used classic yellow mustard? Did you prefer the sweetness of ketchup? Or did your family do something unique like barbecue sauce or cheese dip? Take a quick second to type your favorite dipping sauce down in the comments below, and along with it, tell us the name of the city or town where you grew up in the 1960s. And we absolutely love seeing how different parts of the country enjoyed the exact same childhood comfort foods. Let us know down below, and let's keep this countdown moving. 20. Lipton Onion Soup Dip. This savory masterpiece was the unofficial culinary sponsor of every single television night and backyard cookout across America. The beauty of this dip was that nearly every single household knew the exact recipe completely by heart, mostly because it was printed right on the back of the cardboard soup box. You started by emptying one silver foil packet of Lipton onion soup mix into a plastic tub of fresh sour cream. You gave it a thorough stir until the dried onions and seasonings were distributed. And then came the hardest part, putting it in the refrigerator for at least an hour to let the flavors marry and the onions soften up. Officially, the box labeled it California Dip, but absolutely nobody used that name. It was just onion dip. It was always served in a glass bowl placed dead center in the middle of a giant platter, completely surrounded by a massive mountain of Ruffles potato chips. This was crucial because only the thick, sturdy ridges of a Ruffles chip could handle a proper heavy scoop of dip without snapping in half. That salty, oniony, creamy combination was completely addictive, and the bowl was guaranteed to be scraped totally clean by the end of the night. 19. Spam sliders. The 1960s was an absolute golden era for convenient canned meats, and Spam was the undisputed king of the pantry shelf. While it was great for quick breakfasts, moms in the 60s turned it into a legendary afternoon snack by making Spam sliders. You would open the rectangular can, slide the block of meat out, and slice it into neat squares. Then you drop those slices into a hot skillet, frying them up until the edges got perfectly crisp and browned. To make it truly special, a lot of moms would brush the Spam with a quick glaze of brown sugar and yellow mustard right at the end of frying. The warm, crispy Spam was then placed inside small split dinner rolls or white bread squares, topped with a single round dill pickle slice. It was an incredible combination of salty, sweet, smoky, and tangy all wrapped up in a bite-sized sandwich. It was an incredibly cheap way to feed a pack of hungry neighborhood kids who just ran inside from playing tag. 18. Cream cheese and olive pinwheels. This was the ultimate elegant appetizer of the 1960s, showing up at everything from upscale ladies' luncheons to casual late-night card games. The preparation was simple but required a gentle touch to get the look just right. You started by taking pieces of soft, fresh white bread and cutting the crusts completely off, sometimes using a rolling pin to flatten the bread out slightly. Next, you mixed a brick of softened cream cheese with a generous handful of finely chopped green olives, the kind stuffed with pimentos for that extra pop of color and flavor. You spread a thick, even layer of this savory mixture across the bread and then carefully rolled it up into a tight log. After wrapping the log in wax paper and letting it firm up in the refrigerator for an hour, you took a sharp knife and sliced it crosswise into neat little wheels. Arranged on a platter, they looked beautiful, showcasing a spiral of white cream cheese and green olive bits. They were wonderfully savory, creamy, and salty, making them a massive hit with adults and a frequent target for kids looking to sneak a gourmet bite. 17. Cocktail wieners in grape jelly sauce. Hear us out on this one, because if you describe this recipe to kids today, they will look at you like you've completely lost your mind. But back in the 1960s, this combination was considered an absolute culinary stroke of genius. The recipe required zero cooking skills and only 2 main ingredients. You dumped a full jar of sweet grape jelly and an entire bottle of tangy Heinz chili sauce straight into a saucepan or a mid-century chafing dish. As it heated up over the burner, you stirred the mixture until the jelly completely melted down into a glossy, deep, dark red, sweet and sour glaze. Then you tossed in a couple of packages of little cocktail smokies or sliced hot dogs and let them simmer until they were hot through and thoroughly coated. Kept warm on the counter, guests would use colorful frilled toothpicks to spear the little sausages all night long. The combination of sweet grape jelly and savory, slightly spicy chili sauce sounds completely wrong on paper, but it tasted absolutely incredible. 16. Pineapple cheese ball. No 1960s cocktail hour or Hawaiian-themed backyard luau could ever be considered truly complete without a giant dramatic cheese ball sitting front and center on the snack table. This wasn't just a snack. It was the absolute visual centerpiece of the evening. To give it that definitive 60s tropical twist, Mom would take a couple of bricks of softened cream cheese, mix in some shredded sharp cheddar, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, and a can of thoroughly drained crushed pineapple. Once the mixture was uniform, she would hands-on shape the sticky cheese into a massive, perfect sphere. The final touch was rolling the entire ball in a thick, crunchy blanket of finely chopped pecans or walnuts until it was completely coated. It went into the fridge overnight to firm up and was served surrounded by a pristine fan of Ritz crackers. Guests would use a small butter knife to smear the rich, sweet, and sharp cheese onto a cracker, doing their absolute best not to snap the delicate cracker in half. A single homemade cheese ball could anchor an entire evening of entertaining company. 15. No-bake oatmeal cookies. When the brutal summer heat hit and absolutely nobody wanted to risk turning on the big oven and heating up the entire kitchen, these stovetop cookies were an absolute miracle. They went by 100 different regional names depending entirely on where you lived. Preacher cookies, boiler cookies, cow patties, or just simple no-bakes. The entire process took maybe 10 minutes total, and it all happened in a single saucepan on top of the stove. You boiled a mixture of sugar, cocoa powder, real butter, and milk for exactly 1 minute. Then you took it off the heat, stirred in a big scoop of creamy peanut butter, a splash of vanilla extract, and a mountain of rolled oats. The real trick to this recipe was entirely in the boil. If you boiled it too short, the cookies stayed gooey forever, and you had to eat them with a spoon. If you boiled it even a few seconds too long, they dried out and turned to dry sand. But when Mom timed it just right, dropping spoonfuls onto a sheet of wax paper to firm up, they became glossy, chewy chocolate peanut butter heaven that kids would devour before they even fully cooled down. 14. Popcorn balls. This snack was a massive autumn institution in the 1960s, especially once the leaves started changing color and the evening air got crisp. You started by popping a massive batch of fresh corn on the stovetop in a heavy pot. In a separate saucepan, you boiled up a thick, sticky syrup made of granulated sugar, corn syrup, and butter, which was often tinted bright orange or green with food coloring. You poured the boiling hot syrup over the massive bowl of popcorn, and then came the tough part. You had to work incredibly fast with heavily buttered hands to shape the sticky mess into tight balls before the sugar hardened. Burning your fingertips was practically a written step in the recipe. Back in the day, plenty of neighbors handed these out to trick-or-treaters on Halloween night, individually wrapped in sheets of simple wax paper twisted tightly at both ends. Imagine that today, handing out completely homemade treats from down the street, and nobody thought twice about it. That neighborhood trust faded over the years. 13. Snicker Doodles. With a name that funny, these cookies were absolutely impossible for any kid to forget. Snicker Doodles were a true 1960s kitchen staple, the exact kind of comforting treat that a mom would whip up on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon just because she had a little extra time before dinner. What set a Snickerdoodle completely apart from a standard sugar cookie was its beautiful, crackly, crinkled top, and the fact that the dough balls were rolled in a heavy mixture of ground cinnamon and sugar right before being placed on the baking sheet. The secret weapon in the ingredient list was a little jar of cream of tartar, which gave the cookies their signature slight tang and incredibly soft, chewy texture. The dough came together using basic pantry items like flour, butter, eggs, and sugar, meaning Mom could always make a batch even if she hadn't been to the grocery store in a week. The entire house would fill with the warm, comforting aroma of baking cinnamon, and paired with a cold glass of milk, a warm Snickerdoodle was about as good as childhood could get. 12. Buckeyes. This was a legendary Midwestern holiday tradition that quickly spread across the entire country because it was simply too good to keep secret. These irresistible little treats got their name because they looked exactly like the dark brown nut that falls from the Ohio Buckeye tree. The recipe required no baking whatsoever, starting with a rich mixture of creamy peanut butter, softened butter, vanilla extract, and a mountain of powdered sugar worked into a stiff dough. You rolled the dough into smooth balls and put them in the fridge until they were nice and firm. Then came the fun part that kids loved to help with. You speared each peanut butter ball with a toothpick and dipped it most of the way into a pot of melted semi-sweet chocolate. The trick was leaving a perfect little circle of the tan peanut butter completely exposed at the very top. Making a batch was a full afternoon family project, and the kitchen counters would be completely covered in rows of wax paper while the chocolate set. 11. Divinity candy. This brings us right back to our mystery challenge question. Divinity is indeed the temperamental, weather-dependent candy that separated the master home cooks from the amateurs. It was a cloud-like, snowy white, melt-in-your-mouth confection that required immense patience, a strong arm, and a highly trusted candy thermometer. You started by boiling a precise mixture of sugar, corn syrup, and water until it reached the exact hard ball stage. Then you slowly and carefully drizzled the boiling hot syrup into stiffly beaten egg whites while the electric mixer ran at full speed, beating the mixture continuously until it thickened up and lost its glossy sheen. Right at the end, most grandmothers would fold in a handful of chopped pecans before dropping spoonfuls onto wax paper. But as we mentioned, if the humidity outside was too high or it was raining, the sugar would absorb moisture right out of the air and the candy would never dry, leaving you with a sticky puddle. Getting a batch of Divinity to turn out perfectly light and fluffy was a genuine point of pride for 1960s grandmothers. 10 Haystacks. This was the absolute easiest and most entertaining no-bake sweet treat that a kid could ever help make in a 1960s kitchen, requiring only a tiny bit of parental supervision. Haystacks got their literal name because the finished treats looked exactly like tiny, messy piles of farm hay sitting on the counter. The ingredient list was beautifully simple and wonderfully mid-century. You started by melting a full bag of sweet butterscotch chips in a double boiler on the stove, and some families would stir in a single tablespoon of creamy peanut butter for extra depth. Once the chips were melted and smooth, you dumped in a whole can of crunchy, salty chow mein noodles. You gently folded the mixture until every single hard strand of noodle was completely coated in the smooth butterscotch, and then dropped little clusters onto a sheet of wax paper to harden. The contrast between the intense sweetness of the butterscotch and the salty, airy crunch of the chow mein noodles was completely addictive. They were a massive staple at church bake sales and school functions because they took minutes to make but disappeared almost instantly. 9. Magic Cookie Bars. These rich bars went by a few different names depending on your neighborhood. Some folks called them 7-layer bars, while others knew them as Hello Dollies or simply Magic Bars. But no matter what your family called them, they were a mandatory fixture on every single 1960s dessert table and holiday cookie swap. The recipe achieved legendary status because it was completely foolproof and was printed right on the back of the iconic Eagle brand sweetened condensed milk can. The absolute best part of the recipe was that it required 0 mixing bowls whatsoever. You built the entire dessert directly in the baking pan, starting with a base of crushed graham cracker crumbs pressed into a layer of melted butter. From there, you simply rained down layers of semi-sweet chocolate chips, butterscotch chips, chopped walnuts, and a heavy blanket of shredded coconut. The magic happened when you poured an entire can of thick, sweet condensed milk evenly over the top and popped it in the oven. It baked down into a rich, chewy, gooey, caramelized bar that was incredibly decadent. 8. Monkey bread. This was the ultimate weekend luxury that turned family breakfast into an absolute hands-on event. While traditional yeast versions existed, the shortcut version that took over 1960s kitchens relied on refrigerated biscuit dough from a tube. You took the raw dough rounds, cut them into quarters, and rolled each little piece in a bowl of cinnamon and sugar. Then you piled all the sugar-coated dough pieces randomly into a heavy bundt pan. Before sliding it into the oven, you drenched the entire pan in a rich syrup made of melted butter and brown sugar. As it baked, the biscuits puffed up and wedged together, while the sugar caramelized into a glossy dark toffee coating. When it came out of the oven, you flipped the bundt pan upside down onto a serving plate and watched the hot caramel drip down the sides. You didn't use a fork or a knife to eat monkey bread. The whole point was that you used your fingers to pull off one sticky, sweet, caramelized piece of bread at a time, which is exactly how it earned its funny name. 7. Ambrosia salad. The absolute marvel of things that we proudly used to call a salad back in the 1960s. Ambrosia was the queen of them all, and its literal name translates to food of the gods. In the mid-century American kitchen, that apparently meant canned fruits and lots of marshmallows. The classic version of this dish was built by layering shredded coconut, canned mandarin orange segments, chunked pineapple, and a heavy handful of miniature marshmallows. The ingredient that bound the whole thing together varied by family. Some grandmothers swore by sour cream to cut the sweetness, while others insisted on using a tub of whipped topping. Fancier households would toss in bright red maraschino cherries or chopped pecans for a bit of festive color and crunch. It would sit glistening in a fancy cut glass crystal bowl placed proudly right in the main salad lineup on holiday tables, nestled right between the hot turkey and the dinner rolls. And absolutely nobody questioned it. It was cool, incredibly sweet, creamy, and one single spoonful is enough to bring the entire decade rushing back. 6. Watergate salad. Since we are on the topic of legendary desserts disguised as salads, we have to talk about this famous pale green concoction. While it would eventually take on its presidential scandal name in the 1970s, the recipe itself exploded across America in the late 1960s The very instant Jell-O introduced its brand new instant pistachio pudding mix to grocery store shelves. The recipe was almost too easy to believe, requiring absolutely zero cooking. You simply took a large glass bowl and folded together a box of dry pistachio pudding mix, a can of crushed pineapple along with all its sweet juice, a generous handful of miniature marshmallows, some chopped walnuts or pecans, and an entire tub of Cool Whip. Once it was thoroughly chilled in the refrigerator, it transformed into a fluffy, light green, airy side dish. Was it a side salad? Was it a heavy dessert? Nobody could really say for sure, and frankly, nobody cared. It got passed down the long table at every family reunion and church supper, standing as a testament to an era when we considered marshmallows and whipped topping a perfectly acceptable companion to green beans. 5. Frozen banana pops. When the intense summer sun rolled around in the 1960s, frozen banana pops were the ultimate homemade way for moms to help kids beat the heat without spending a fortune at the ice cream truck. The entire concept was simple and felt a little bit like magic to a young child. Mom would take a bunch of bananas, peel them, cut them completely in half, and push a wooden popsicle stick or a sturdy old metal fork deep into the cut end before laying them on a tray in the freezer until they were frozen rock solid. For the deluxe version, she would melt some chocolate chips in a double boiler. She'd dip the frozen banana straight into the warm chocolate, which would magically harden into a crisp, crackly shell the exact second it touched the frozen fruit. Before the chocolate fully set, she'd quickly roll it in a bowl of crushed peanuts or colorful candy sprinkles. It was part afternoon snack and part fun craft project. You'd pull one out of the freezer wrapped in aluminum foil and go sit on the front porch steps to eat it before it could melt down your arm. 4. Homemade Kool-Aid Popsicles. Long before supermarket freezer aisles were packed to the brim with every single flavor of frozen novelty imaginable, kids routinely made their own popsicles at home, and the waiting was half the fun of summer. The classic method was to mix up a pitcher of standard Kool-Aid, making sure to add a little extra sugar so it froze up nice and sweet. Then you poured the bright liquid into one of those iconic plastic Tupperware popsicle molds with the colorful pull-out sticks that every single family seemed to own back then. If your household didn't own the official molds, you simply used a metal ice cube tray from the fridge, waiting until the liquid was semi-frozen before carefully balancing toothpicks in the center of each cube. Some moms got extra creative and froze orange juice or leftover fruit punch, while others froze chocolate pudding for a richer treat. The hardest part of the entire process was the torturous waiting, and more than one impatient kid pulled the stick out way too early, ending up with a broken stick and a cup of slushy juice. They stained your tongue bright red or purple and cost almost nothing to make. 3. Rumaki. Now we are stepping into the distinctly sophisticated, exotic, and worldly side of 1960s home entertaining. Rumaki was a legendary holdover from the massive tiki culture and Polynesian craze that completely swept across the United States during the decade. It was a little bundle of intense flavor and mystery that instantly made any living room cocktail hour feel incredibly upscale and modern. To make it, you took a crisp canned water chestnut and paired it with a small piece of rich chicken liver. You wrapped those two ingredients snugly in a strip of raw bacon, securing the entire little bundle tightly with a wooden toothpick. A lot of home cooks would marinate the finished bundles in a mixture of soy sauce, brown sugar, and ground ginger before popping them under the broiler until the bacon turned perfectly crisp and dark. It sounded incredibly fancy and daring to guests back then, delivering an amazing contrast of textures, the smoky, savory crunch of the bacon giving way to the surprising watery snap of the chestnut right in the center. As the tiki trend began to fade, Rumaki quietly slipped off the radar. 2. Pickle Rollups. This is another classic 1960s snack that sounds incredibly strange to younger generations today, but it was an absolute beloved staple of mid-century party platters. The method was pure simplicity and a little bit of culinary genius. You took a flat slice of deli ham or dried beef and spread a smooth, thin layer of softened cream cheese completely across the surface. Then you laid a whole crisp dill pickle spear or a series of sweet pickle slices right along one edge and rolled the meat up tightly around the pickle like a small log. After letting it chill in the refrigerator to firm up, you used a sharp knife to slice the log crosswise into neat little pinwheels. Arranged on a serving tray, each piece showed off a brilliant green pickle center, ringed beautifully in white cream cheese and pink ham. They were salty, tangy, creamy, and crunchy all in one single bite, and they had a habit of disappearing off the relish tray incredibly fast. 1. Sausage balls. And finally, arriving at the absolute #1 spot on our countdown, we have the undisputed king of 1960s gatherings, the humble sausage ball. This savory snack anchored countless holiday mornings, game day tailgates, and weekend brunches because it was a magical mixture of just 3 simple ingredients mixed entirely by hand. You combined a pound of bulk pork sausage, a big pile of shredded sharp cheddar cheese, and a few cups of biscuit baking mix straight from the box. You worked the mixture together with your hands, which was a real workout, and rolled the dough into neat bite-sized spheres. They went onto a baking sheet and into the oven, coming out perfectly golden brown, deeply savory, and beautifully crispy on the outside while staying tender on the inside. People popped them into their mouths like popcorn. The recipe was an absolute fixture on the back of the biscuit box and in every local community cookbook, and every family had a slightly different ratio or secret spice they swore by. A tray of these, fresh out of the oven, never lasted more than 5 minutes, making them a true taste of the decade. And there you have it. The bustling kitchens, the laminate counters, and the neighborhood gatherings of the 1960s might be a fond memory now, but these incredible flavors definitely don't have to be forgotten. As we mentioned earlier, we read through every single comment left on our videos, so please share your absolute favorite memories and recipes down in the comments section below. If this extensive trip down memory lane brought a smile to your face and a bit of nostalgia to your heart, do us one small favor before you go. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. It directly helps us keep these wonderful historical memories alive for the next generation to appreciate. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep cooking with love.